It's a fad, right, Naresh? I mean, retiring early and then, of course, sailing into the sunset, pursuing all your passions. So let's start off first with then what exactly inspired you to retire early in the first place? When did you first start thinking about retiring early?
It has been an interesting round trip, and in that globally. So I started off my career in broking and was working with Kotak Securities in 90s, and then I ended up into capital market consulting with TCS for over 15 years. And in that course, I have seen a lot of exchanges, investment banks, how markets, economies operate, and was increasingly fascinated. But my career in consulting took me away from investments, and I knew the passion to pursue would have to be in my retired journey. I came across the concept, hedgehog concept by Jim Collins in his book Good to Great, that a company or an individual, a professional needs to operate at the intersection of three concepts: passion, skill set, and opportunity. And I knew that my professional career was not squarely in the intersection of this. I was skilled, not quite passionate, and was paying me reasonably well. But investing was definitely squarely in the passion and skill set opportunity. But I don't know how it will pay me. And hence I thought, let me go through my career, build up savings, and then do it as a passion post retirement. So that's how the seeds of my early retirement was sown.
But had you always, I mean, when you started off your career, back in the 20s, did you always have it in your mind that you want to retire early, and did you accordingly perhaps, choose your career path, or did you consciously take steps that, hey, I have this goal of retiring at, 40, 45, and did you consciously take certain steps?
So this was not quite at the initial stages of the career. That time we were kind of, what I would say, jobs were not as plentiful and careers were not as lucrative when I graduated. This came through in 5, 10, 15 years of my career. My tracking global markets, watching how markets operate globally, also was building up my skills. So I realized I was investing pretty well. During the first 15, 20 years of my consulting career, I made some very lucky investment decisions, primarily aided by how I was tracking economies, markets, commodities. And so I knew that some magic was working. I was staggering at rates which I think would have probably compared with what top fund managers were doing.
Yeah.
And there's also a good friend, Govindlal Gilda from Hyderabad. He's been my client in my broking days and now a good friend. So he was the guy who was prodding me. I should be towards investing and not quite into consulting, because he was following how I was doing. He was my window into the investment market. I knew nobody else in investing. So I used to talk to him even when I was working in Switzerland. I used to talk to him once a week. We used to share ideas.
Your mentor.
So yeah, he became, he was, you could call more than a mentor. Really was the guy instrumental in pushing me, because leaving a good job is not going to be easy for any one of us, because if we are good in the job, then the incomes are rising and it's a treadmill. So your salaries are rising and the hurdle is increasing every passing year. There are multiple facets of how one can retire early, but the number one consideration is financial. So, and one mistake I've observed some of them thinking on is that, let's say my annual spend is 12 lakhs a year. I can put an FD which gives me 12 lakhs interest a year. That is not going to work, because that doesn't account for inflation, that doesn't account for uncertainties on investments, that doesn't account for lump sum expenses which can come. So what I had figured out, that apart from a fully paid house and no debt, one needs to have a corpus which has to be a multiple of your annual spend. And assuming someone makes 10-12% a year return on the corpus and there's a 4% inflation, so one could spend half of real return, post-inflation return. That would need a corpus which is 30 to 50 times one's annual spend. So
in terms of basically the steps that maybe, as a working individual, maybe in their early 20s, and if they do have this goal that I want to retire after working for 20 years, during their working life, during that span of 20 years, what steps should he or she proactively take to help them in that journey beyond?
So of course the journey has to be to build a retirement corpus, and it has to be via investments in a diversified portfolio of assets. It could be equities, equity mutual funds. I also had gold because gold was doing well. Could be in debt, liquid funds. But yeah, the corpus has to grow. If one puts everything in debt and fixed income, I doubt one can reach 40-50x of your annual spend, because your spend itself will be going up and the incremental savings from your salary is not going to be sufficient. So one needs to be in growth assets, which is where I was, and and built up my portfolio.
Okay. So Naresh, is early retirement then for everybody?
Yes and no. If one were in a job like Warren Buffett, where he says, I literally tap dance to work every day, so you don't have to retire. But for most mortals like us, I don't think we are in those jobs. If the work is giving a lot of stress, then I think one needs to contemplate retirement. But definitely one needs to have a passion or a cause in which one will retire into. You can't retire into something which is nothing. It will demotivate you, or maybe you will get bored, or I don't know, whatever it is. It needs to be a cause or a passion, which is what you will retire into. And for me, it was macroeconomics and markets. I really enjoyed reading about markets. During my 5 years in Zurich, I was reading Financial Times cover to cover every day. I really enjoyed. I used to read half in the tram going home and the other half in the tram coming back. I had requested clients in the office, that please have the FT at the end of the day on my table. So yeah, it needs to be a passion towards which you will go into, and obviously the safety nets on finances will have to be built. That's the minimum hygiene requirement on which you have to contemplate whether you want to retire.
Okay, so leave us with some inspiration then, Naresh, as opposed to what your life was in the 20 years of your working versus what it is now. In an ideal retiree's life, that is you, how does your day start and how does it end?
So, of course, I enjoyed my job, but it required a lot of travel.
Yeah.
So, and most of my travel was abroad, so it took me away from family. For example, when my son's 12th standard board exams came and when his admissions to IITs were happening, I wasn't in Chennai. I felt very bad that I wasn't there sharing those joyful moments. So yeah, it was taking a toll on the family life to some extent. I'll tell again. So it was a little bit, I was compromising a bit on the family life, but of course enjoying my career and was doing well in career. But post-retirement is been I would say, wonderful journey. So I now allocate my time based on my priorities. Of course, I still work, I read up, I meet some companies, or I invest. The only thing I don't like is doing taxes. But that's the only job.
Who likes that, right? Who likes paying taxes to the government?
Yeah, more than paying taxes, I'm happy paying taxes, but to do the tax work, yeah, that's the only thing of my job I don't like. But yeah, it's a very, I would say, balanced and dream journey, if I can call that. I travel, like our son studies in US, and so we go there once a year, stay with him. There's more time to learn yoga, or I'm learning flute. There's more time to be with parents, for example, or pursue other interests. I come home for lunch, although we have an office, so I spend more time in things. My daughter was doing an internship in Bangalore for 2 months in summer, so we spent some time with her. So yeah, those are the perks which I think one can never measure financially. In terms of what one can do.
Okay, Naresh, thanks so much for that very inspirational journey, and I hope many of our viewers now think before they just spontaneously jump to quit their job and retire early.
Thank you.